in summary what I'm talking about, i.e., a definition. And so I don't care too much to argue definitions as long as what I'm talking about is very clear. I can essentially say before birth it doesn't have rights, after birth it has rights, and that's my position. I don't play too much of the like the words and the definitions too much. That's all. Can I twist my thing? Let me see. Can I rotate? I can't. That's what's up. Okay, she's gone too. Damn, what the fuck is going on? Wait, why is it zooming? That's not what I want. Yo. Okay, now this is finna piss me off. Okay, that's real. Okay, now I just gotta figure out how to get it vertical. Cause I thought I could rotate that motherfucker, but I can't. That sucks. Right about there. That's real. Kinda. Okay, that's perfect. Damn, that's red. There we go. Cool. She needs a request in because I don't know what just happened, bro. I'm trying to fix my cam and everything. My phone's on the charger too, so. Yeah, that's real. Yeah. Yeah. Cool, I got that situated out. Alright, she needs to request back in if she wants to join. Cause now my live's starting to get it kicking. Yeah. Let's get it kicking. Let's get it kicking. Yeah. Oh yeah, shout out to that person that said I need to take a biology class. I just don't care about biology. I mean, I passed it twice. I just don't care. 2 biology classes in anatomy. I just don't care to flex my intellectual muscles on biology because who cares? I could be like, yeah, so like the embryo and then your phalanges and then I forgot what your skin's called. I don't know. I used to know like the different layers of skin and what they did. I don't care anymore. I just don't care. I don't care. I'm not a science dude. More like a history kind of guy. I could talk about like history shit. So who cares? Says every person ignorant that doesn't do that. I mean, I do the research only where it's necessary. Cool.
Okay, I'm back one more time. I think last time I got cut, the live got cut off again, but we're saying that definitions are unimportant because why?
It doesn't change the argument.
But it does when you're talking about something that is like I would say like human rights. The fact that the term human rights is contingent on whatever the definition of the word human is.
I mean, again, I think human rights shouldn't be used as a valid concept again because it's a redundancy. I would say the only thing that does have rights would be human. So therefore, trying to making a subcategory called so by human rights, it implies that there's categories, that there's rights, and then there's a subcategory called human rights, which implies that there's another subcategory of some other animal or species that has rights, and I would disagree with that.
So then you don't believe in animal rights?
No, I don't think animal rights is a thing.
Okay, that's fair. So then you're just talking about rights.
Precisely.
So, I mean, I would say the widely accepted definition of human rights is rights that are inherent to all human beings.
Yeah, nah. I would say right is it's a moral political principle that sanctions one's freedom of action. I think.
So you just really don't believe in the objective term of, you don't believe in the objective concept of rights then?
By objective, you mean what?
That it's applicable to every human being universally.
I mean, given what I already meant by human being, yeah, it's applicable to every human being universally under given context, because there's cases in which criminals forfeit their rights, which is the problem with the definition that you gave, that it's inherent. If it's inherent, then it means it's unremovable, but it is removable because you could forfeit your rights by committing crimes. So,
I mean, there's prisoner rights. I mean, I don't think you can forfeit your human rights. You can forfeit your human rights under whatever the rights are that the government that you belong to gives, but
yeah,
that's irrelevant to the conversation, I think.
Yeah, I would disagree with the distinction, plus the concept of prisoner rights, but it's okay.
I don't know. I think that it really just gets down to what your concept of rights is and where it's applicable. I believe in that human rights are applicable to all humans everywhere.
Why?
And I think if you're just saying that it's not. And so I think that we've reached an impasse.
Why? Why is it applicable to all humans everywhere?
Because humans by nature, humans need a way to regulate their own behavior, because we are conscious of our own behavior and we need a way to regulate it. And so I would say that human rights, while it's something that is unique to humans and it's a construct, it still exists and it's still relevant, even though it's something that is unique to humans. Like it's necessary.
Necessary for what?
For functional society.
By functional, you mean what exactly?
I mean, prospering.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's the very that's very interesting you say that, because so we agree in words here, but we're not agreeing in meaning. I would essentially kind of say the exact same thing. I would remove the regulate the behavior, but I would agree with the conclusion that individual rights is necessary for a functional society, and by functional society I mean a society that's going to be flourishing, that's going to be very voluntary amongst people, so on and so forth. But it's not just, I would reduce it a little bit more. It's not just necessary for society, because society isn't a thing. Society isn't like an actual thing. Society is just a component of many other things, which is individuals. Rights is necessary for an individual. Rights is necessary for me. And it's necessary for you. And the reason being is because, again, I go back to what I was saying. It is factual that each individual must interact or must utilize certain actions or certain capacities to live for themselves. Right? It's a fact that I must think and act and do certain things and engage in activities voluntarily for me to live my life. And the fact that you are, violating my rights by initiating force against me is violating that fact. And that's what the concept of rights is to ban, is to ban that contradiction, right? Essentially saying it's a fact that I must do X and you're preventing me to do X. That's a contradiction. Rights are to ban that. And so when we have this under a very clear understanding that it's functional for society, and I'll put it this way. The fact that contradiction exists, the fact that I say I want to do X and you're preventing me to do X, the fact that conflict exists, that's where the necessity of rights comes about, is to prevent that conflict. And the issue is that conflict is amongst individual human beings. That conflict doesn't exist amongst embryos. It doesn't exist among zygotes. We don't have conflicts with unborn entities.
Okay, so I think I see what you're saying. Can I just try to repeat what you said, and so that I make sure that I'm understanding you?
Sure.
So you're saying that rights only are necessary to exist between two beings that are capable of thinking about each other and their actions.
Two or more, and additionally, it's not It's not about thinking about each other in the actions. It doesn't matter what degree of complexity the action is, because obviously there's, people who are physically impaired and so on and so forth, or mentally impaired. And thus, the complexity of the actions that they're utilizing is going to be reduced to such a very low degree. But, they still have to use their own biological capacities to function for themselves. Like, they're not utilizing like the lungs of someone else, such as the case of the unborn. So, again, for each person to indulge in whatever capacity that they have to continue their lives, right? Their concept of rights is to ban the fact that I might violate that capacity. And that happens amongst human beings, i.e. those who are already born. We don't have conflicts with the unborn. And this is why I would say the concept of individual rights is inapplicable to the unborn.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're saying if a living being, if their autonomy relies on someone else physically, then human rights aren't applicable?
Not quite. The reason being is because there are medical procedures in which two people can voluntarily exchange, like biological capacities. That doesn't mean that they're absolved of rights, because one, they're already born, and two, they voluntarily agreed to engage in that. So that would still be like an action they can still do together and still have rights. That doesn't absolve them of having rights. And so this is why I would call the instance of abortion and birthing and pregnancy as a whole as sui generis. It's very hard to make comparisons to the relationship between the woman and the unborn to the outside world. So that's why I would say making that very kind of contextless statement is kind of dangerous.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I see your argument. And I personally would probably have to do a little bit more research about the definition of human rights, and I think I just have to formulate my argument a little more. So, I will be back eventually if you have another live, probably, but it was good talking to you. And I think I just got to probably get my definitions in check.
Okay. If you want, I do have a couple of the books. I was going to look through them and see, because it's been like a year since I've been on TikTok live for real, because I've been debating this for like 2 years. I'm not gonna lie, it hasn't been a year. It's been a long time though, so I'm very rusty right now. That's why I like thought about the concept of rights, because like when somebody says, okay, define rights, I could usually spit it, but I know the book over there has the definition. I know it's like a moral principle. It's a moral principle it's a moral principle defining and sanctioning one's freedom of action in a social context. There it is. That's how I define it.
But now you're bringing morals into it.
Yeah. So the reason why it's okay. There's two layers of it. So you have the moral in the instance of is it moral for me to violate this person's right, versus is it moral for me to steal from this person. There's two different type of layers of that. So there is a moral underpinning, but that's a whole different conversation. Because like if I am going to steal from you, there's two questions that come in. Is it moral for me to violate this person's rights, and is it moral for me to steal from you? There's two different. It's about the same exact thing, but there's two questions that stem from it. So the concept of to it, yes.
Okay, so I think in that case, then you have to prove an objective morality.
That's easy. Okay, by objective you mean what?
But true universally for all people.
And what is the conditions in order for it to meet, being universally for all people?
Something that is, the only things that we know is universal to all humans is something based in biology that can be observed and tested.
Okay. But like, what what is the conditions necessary that I have to meet in order for it to be considered universally applicable to all human beings?
I would say the conditions that have to be met, like, personally, I think morality is based on psychology and the brain. And so if something's moral, it has to be good for you and for someone else. Because I think it's based on the concept of selflessness. That's what I think. I misunderstood your question, but that's where I come from. I believe it's objective.
You know, I would defend the position that it is objective, and by objective I don't mean that it's coming from God or something like that, because that would be an easy example of subjective morality.
Right.
But I just now noticed that even if I were to prove the objectivity of morality, it wouldn't have any much bearing on what I'm saying, because you do have to remember that by a moral political principle in the concept of individual rights, the moral aspect comes from, again, the question, is it moral for me to violate this person's rights? Which already presupposes the objective or scientific foundation of rights in order for you to ask that question in the first place. So the moral aspect wouldn't play a big role in here in defining objectively what the concept of individual rights and what they're used for. So I think we were definitely about to go down a rabbit hole, but thinking about it, like, it's not necessary. We don't have to go down there.
Well, I think what you're saying is it kind of proves itself just by bringing it up. Is that what you're saying?
No.
It implies itself. Like, you're saying the fact that you even brought up the question in the first place makes it obsolete.
No. The fact. Okay, so the moral aspect under the right is the fact that one person has to ask, well, either implicitly, explicitly, or not at all. The fact that a person has to ask himself, is it moral for me to violate this person's right? And so that's the moral aspect when it comes to the concept of individual rights. But when I ask myself, let's say I ask myself consciously, is it moral for me to violate this person's rights? In that question already presupposes the concept or the objective concept of individual rights. And thus that means that concept has to be justified prior to the moral question. Okay, so therefore going into the whole moral question and trying to prove it wouldn't be necessary, because the concept of rights would have already been proven way long before.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess then we're back to who has rights and who doesn't.
Yeah, which goes back to the whole entire argument. It would just be, I would say the unborn don't have rights and those who are born do have rights.
Okay. Well, now we're back to that whole thing. So I'm gonna get back to you on that. It's not something I can wrap my head around right at the moment. So.
Oh no! I mean, don't feel bad. Like, definitely come back. Like, I got a whole like whiteboard in my room. Like, this is something I've been writing on the board, thinking, pondering about. Like, something I took a lot of time thinking about.
Okay, word. Yeah, I'll be back. I followed you too, so yeah, I got you. All right, I'll see you. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
Bye.
What do I got on my whiteboard? That's crazy. On my whiteboard right now. See, okay, if you are a hard thinker, go invest in a whiteboard right now and install it in your room. I'm telling you, whiteboard is a lifesaver. Right now, I got on my whiteboard, I got a whole, I can't say timeline, but I essentially got a whole, like, a bunch of integration of how the concept of civil rights began, evolved, and then eventually evolved into critical race theory. That's what I got on my whiteboard. And I haven't erased it since, like, I don't know, I wrote that like several months ago. So, like, that's been up there for like 5 months. But yeah, I have like pre and post Reconstruction arguments, political rights going into civil rights, and civil rights is actually split into, it's actually trinomial, but it's split into two for right now. So you have public rights, which just means public utilities, and then you have private rights, which essentially means like life, liberty, private property, and the pursuit of happiness. What the fuck is that? Yeah. And that ties into the 14th Amendment and Commerce Clause. Oh my God, that's so much. But yeah, I'm telling you, the best way to understand something is, I know this man Amir did not just join the live, bro. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. Do you know?
Hey, what's up, man?
What's going on?
How are you doing?
Chilling, bro.
Um, so I just kind of wanted to touch on a couple things you guys were talking about. One is this idea of like inherent rights don't actually exist. It's like a poetic human delusion that we kind of hold on to. You have the ability to end your own life um, outside of circumstances beyond yourself. Your body can end itself by disease, by just some kind of a failure. No other animals really would recognize any kind of rights that we actually have. So I don't think that these ideas that the only thing that could potentially consider as a right is the right to death, because that's something that cannot actually be taken away from you. Um, Hopefully that makes some kind of sense.
Why not life, liberty, private property, and the pursuit of happiness?
Um, well, it's more of a privilege. You don't get to pick like what your preferences are. You don't get to pick well when you're happy or when you're not. That's a circumstance that's outside of your control. There's outside stimuli that's going to cause all of those things. As far as like property or anything like that, sure, you get to play with things in real life, but how much of this do you actually own just because a piece of paper says you own something? Um, it's just matter. Like, it's just material. It doesn't. That could also be taken very easily from you. Like, someone can just walk up to you and take, like, let's say a watch that you're wearing that you worked really hard on getting. And so these ideas are just, like I said, a human delusion that we kind of hold on to. I like fun things too, like I like playing with cars or whatever, but the idea of ownership is kind of like a surreal idea to me.
Yeah. Cool. So this is precisely why the founding document says the pursuit of happiness. Um, and yeah, no, you don't get to choose to be happy directly. It's more so an indirect thing. It's more so you do have to realize that these stimuli that occurs in your brain is a product of what you're witnessing and or experiencing outside of you, and what's happening outside of you for the majority in your life is dictated by the choices that you make. So again, you could engage in certain activities, you could achieve value, you can achieve goals, and so on and so forth. You can have a productive life, and so on and so forth. And this would be a means in producing positive stimuli in which your brain will be mentally experiencing this happiness aspect. And the fact that we as human beings is not just a body, it's also a mind. And so this is why mental health is also a thing. And the quality of your mental clarity and thinking and enjoyment is also very important. Because having a good mental status is very, very important and also necessary for living a human life, because you can't just do all things physical and negate the mind, because eventually we'll just shut down. Depression's a real thing. So the concept, I mean, I see as though that you're thinking as these things as a very materialistic or a very concrete bound kind of thinking. What you do forget is that these things is a relationship. And so those who only deal with like objects mentally, or those who deal with only concrete things mentally, have a very hard struggle dealing with things as relationships, because their relation, you can't touch relationships, you can't grasp relationships, you can't see relationships, you can only visualize them conceptually, such as the gravitational relationship between me and my phone. Right, it's a relationship here, even though I can't interact with it. Or more importantly, the gravitational relationship between the sun and the earth, right? We can build thousands of mathematical formulas and models that demonstrates the gravitational relationship, but and somebody who thinks so very materialistic or concrete bound, would say, well, this is just all numbers and stuff like that. There is no actual gravitational relationship. It's just things moving. You could think about it that way. But again, that would be negating the fact that these mathematical formulas are accurately portraying reality. And so the same thing is applicable with the rights. The rights are to accurately predict, or not predict, but portray a proper relationship, not only with yourself, but amongst other human beings. And so for someone who thinks in a concrete bound way would say, well, there is no proper relationship. It's just people doing things.
To an extent, I would agree with you, but because I subscribe to hard determinism,
Yeah, that makes
you
more
know,
sense.
right. So even with the idea of choice, in itself is an illusion. If you're bound to like your preferences and the things that you're convinced of, you don't get to pick and choose what you would think is a choice. You only have one thing that you would be able to actually do, and the other things that seem like they're a choice, they're only an illusion, which because you're not convinced, you would not actually do.
You read that
So I
guy?
mean,
What's his name?
I understand the aspect that you're kind of trying to portray. It's just like I said, to me, it doesn't seem very realistic.
Who's that guy? Sam Smith? Steve?
Sam Harris.
Yeah. You probably read his book or something, right?
Yeah, I've heard of the guy. I don't necessarily agree with everything he talks about, but I think that the whole determinism thing, for the most part, he's got a pretty based idea on that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, most determinists are faulty in their reasoning. I mean, I would say the core issue when it comes to determinists, and I mean, it's not, yeah, well, I mean, to an extent, it would be your guys' fault because, I mean, everyone has a responsibility to, logically evaluate everything. But in a sense, determinist has been heavily plagued with like bad philosophy for a very, very long time, ever since the mind-body dichotomy was an actual thing, which started Plato. But I would say determinists kind of fail at understanding what the brain is and what consciousness is in nature. Most people think it in a very materialistic way or a very scientific way.
Right.
I would be assuming that you hold this position. And so if free will isn't a thing that we can conceptualize or see being activated in the brain, and we know that the brain is all material and all particles and all neurons and so on and so forth, and they exist as particles and as matter. And if we can see that matter already operates in a very logical and confined way, such as if I, grab this brick and I drop it down to the floor, you know what I'm saying? It wouldn't float up. It would automatically drop down, and it will always drop down for the end of time because it's just the law of bricks and gravity. And then, so if we apply the same thing to the mind, if the mind is already structured in such a way right now, currently, then there's already a predetermined way in which all these particles and so on and so forth could move according to their nature. And so that means every action in the future will always be determined.
So qualia and consciousness were one of the key factors that kind of really held me back from accepting determinism to like the fullest degree. So I know what you mean about that. I did struggle with that for a very long time, but ultimately, like when we look into like how the physical aspect of things work, and when we get into the quantum mechanics and quantum physics of things, although things might appear to be random at times, I think it's our lack of understanding of these things that place us into classical physics, regardless of whether they are actually random or not. Even if there is a sense of freedom there, this still moves you into classical physics where you are bound to the laws and regulations of the 3 or 4 dimensional plane which we operate within. So us being a physical being with a physical brain, even our mind, to the extent where we are able to measure our synapses and our neurons communicating within each other, this still shows the physicality that we talk about. Even if there are things prior to that are not physical, this still pulls you back into causality, which we don't have the ability to break out of. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but yeah, but like determinism and free will,
Okay.
it's not really a topic up here. So.
Okay, yeah, I apologize then. I'm not
No,
trying
no, you're
to
good. You're good.
derail
You're
your
good.
life. But yeah, no, I honestly just wanted to touch on the whole idea of like, these just people having this idea that like we have inherent rights because we declared we have these inherent rights, which I don't think are a thing. Because Aladdin wouldn't recognize my right to life if it's on me. It would just see me as the right for them to be able to eat. So, anyways, but I do like your live, man. I appreciate it, man. I'm following
No
you.
problem. No problem.
All right, man. I'll catch you later, man.
All right. Oh, sand is back down. I wanted to cough so bad. I wanted to cough so bad, bro.
Hello again.
Hi.
Hi. So I guess after thinking about it for a minute, I guess I determined that your stance makes sense if you're coming from it from an atheistic perspective. But then, so if you are an atheist, basically, you have to accept that there's no justification for imposing objective morality on anyone else.
You frame that as if it's inherent for those of a religious morality to impose morality on other people.
I'm not, I guess what I mean by impose, I guess I mean justify.
Okay.
Like I justify the fact that I believe the fact that the fact that murdering someone is objectively wrong. And you don't need God to prove that. Okay, but you need God to be like, well, why is my stance that we should follow that objective morality right? Like, why do we need to, yeah, objectively it's moral, but why do we need to follow that?
No, if I was religious, I would definitely disagree with that. I would say that one, it's necessary to have God in both instances.
Yes.
Because if you're going to have moral knowledge, you would need to be a follower of God automatically, right? You, as a person who has quote unquote moral knowledge, is not really authentic moral knowledge if it's not from the Word of God. And so I would say, if you were to say that to like a really good religious debater, I would be wary of that, of saying that, to be more consistent. But again, no, I think. Well, I mean, firstly, I would say my position very briefly, but I don't know how this connects to if you're still trying to talk about the abortion thing. But my position,
Well, I guess, I'm sorry, go ahead.
my position is moral truths can be and can only be validated objectively without the existence of God.
Yes.
The reason why I say can only be is because if there was a God that was imposing a morality, there's so many layers in which it could be faulty. One, it being subjective, and two, that wouldn't be a morality, right? Morality is something you're supposed to make a decision about because you have knowledge of it and you know it's a good thing, not because you're having like faith and you really don't know it's a good thing, but you're being told it's a good thing, which doesn't make something moral.
Right, exactly. I would agree with that. I think what I'm saying is, and tying it back to the abortion thing, if you're saying abortion is, people should be able to, I guess what I'm saying is if you're an atheist, the whole concept of objective rules that we should follow is obsolete because you have to accept the fact that your reasoning for doing something is just as valid as someone else's reasoning for doing something objectively wrong. So yes, if you're an atheist, all I'm saying is if you're an atheist, you can't be pro-life. You have no justification for it. So I would say your position makes sense.
Could you, I don't know if it's me or I don't know if it's you. Could you reformulate that in another way of what you're trying to say between the relationship of justifying, imposing moral beliefs on other people, atheism, and abortion?
Okay, so starting from the abortion thing, if I'm going to go backwards, if you are an atheist, you have to be pro-choice logically, because in order to say this should be illegal because it's wrong, then you have to have, in order for you to say that this is illegal because it's wrong, you have to have a basis for saying why we should impose that law on everyone. So objective morality exists with or without a belief in God. Objective morality exists, but you have to have you have to have belief in God to justify why everyone should follow those objective morals. Because if you don't have a God, then you have to admit that not being objectively moral is just as valid as being objectively moral, which means any immoral action is just as valid as any moral action.
Okay. I'm just saying that, like, see, so I mean, from the little discussion that we had earlier, I'm a very very to ground reality kind of guy. And so my basis for like, if it was like firstly, if there was a government that speared up and essentially said, we're going to protect individual rights, which means the concept of individual rights is in accordance with reality. They have reality side. They have every single justification to build up a government and protect people's individual rights. And so if the society decided, okay, it wouldn't be society decided, but concluded to that the unborn don't have rights and women have rights, and so thus they're going to make let me think of something opposite. No, somebody was going to unalive somebody, and the government was like, no, you can't do that. This is a violation of the concept of individual rights. They will have every single right to do so politically, which means that it's already politically sanctioned that unaliving someone isn't a thing you can do in society. And then also morally they have a right, because I would say the moral aspect is, this is going to be very ambiguous, but rightfully so, because I'm not here to have the moral conversation. But what I would hold as moral is that anything that promotes your factual well-being or and happiness. So I think that every single object, although different, every single object that exists has a particular nature, and us so too have us human beings as well. And so there's like factual requirements, like biologically, metaphysically, for us to fulfill in order to have an objectively well-being and like happy life. And so when that moral compass is essentially saying that, and I would say yes, the government has the right to infiltrate and ban somebody from performing murder and throwing them in the prison, because that's what's going to promote, again, their well-being and also their overall happiness, because like not everyone's allowed to like violate your pursuit towards those things.
Okay, yes. So when you're coming from it from a perspective of the government who has a obligation to protect the overall well-being of greater society.
Well,
I would
not
say you're right.
society, I would just say just other people.
I would, yes. I mean, I would say that from a government perspective, laws are in place so that society stays functional. And if you're coming from it from that perspective, then abortion is just a matter of what the government defines as human rights or not. But if you're coming from it as from an atheistic perspective, you have to admit that human rights are pretty much obsolete outside of a governmental standpoint. because it comes back, because human rights imply immorality.
Oh, now I see what the hell you're saying. I'm like, yo, I've been lost for a minute. That's why I'm like talking slow. Like, I've been lost for a minute. Okay, cool. So, you're essentially saying, because I'm an atheist, my concept of individual rights will become obsolete. That means unfunctional or unopposable because they require morality, and my position is that there's no objective moral code.
Your position from an atheistic standpoint, you can believe in an objective moral code if you want. It's irrelevant to the fact that why do people need to follow that objective moral code?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, cool. I see what you mean. Because if my objective moral code is dependent on me as a human being and what's best for me to pursue life, pursue my own happiness, and pursue my overall well-being, and here are the principles that outline it, and these are testable, this is like scientific, blah, blah, whatever. Like, I call them virtues, there's certain principles. Then they would also be universally applicable to the human beings to reach the same exact ends. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. By principles, I don't mean very minute principles, such as, you know, I might make a decision that it's moral to, you know, I don't know. I make a decision that it might be moral for me to continue to pursue college and get my degree. And therefore everyone else should be doing it. No. These principles are like very broad that are necessary for you to enhance your own life. I put it this way. The context of my life is different. So therefore the context of my life is different from somebody else. Like, somebody might be in college, I might be in college, but just for my life and my life only, it might be moral for me to stay in college as opposed to this person who it might be more moral for them to actually take a step back from college and do something else. But that doesn't negate the objectivity of the principles that's being utilized to make those judgments. We have two different lives, so the output's going to be different.
Right, but from the perspective of, okay, let's say abortion, you're talking about whether it's okay. So let me back up. In the context of the morality of murder. So something not so like, you know, like going to college is, yeah, that's like a personal thing, but like murder, because that includes human rights. And I'm saying, if you're an atheist, yeah, murder is still, whether you believe in a God or not, murder is still objectively wrong. But you have to admit that if someone decides to murder someone, it's just as valid as them deciding not to follow the rules of the objective morality is just as valid as your right to follow the rules and not murder someone.
Valid based off of what?
Valid based off of nothing. Based off of, there's no foundation other than the laws of society.
Then it's invalid.
I guess I don't mean validity. I guess I mean the only reason to impose that objective morality on someone is because it would harm society.
No, that would never be my justification. I don't believe at all in justifying anything based off of other people. I always believe on justifying something because it's your life, based off of yourself. And so the reason why society is following X code, and the reason why society should impose certain moral things, such as don't murder, is not because, oh my God, you hurt Billy. What did you do? Like, oh, you really hurt him. Like, what does that have to do with the murder, right? So if we actually change the perspective that lying isn't bad just because it hurts them, we could actually show you that lying is bad for you, or murdering is bad for you, by principle. And so when you make it about the person themselves, that is a reason, that is a foundation in which why they shouldn't do activity X, Y, and Z. Because it's not about other people no more. You can still make it about them, like, that's fine. But I think the primary emphasis should be on the person itself, because every immoral act has a negative impact on you. That's how it should be.
Yes, I agree with that. All I'm saying is, so take a situation where you have someone who's been given a week to live, and they have a mental disorder where they enjoy hurting animals. Give them a reason why they shouldn't go do that, because they only have a week to live. Like, yeah, objectively, in the long term, yeah, it's not going to be good for them psychologically, but they don't have the long term to think about.
I mean, I don't understand. Okay, okay, let's say that person exists and they're like, screw it, I just want to hurt animals. I mean, the concept of rights isn't supposed to be this kind of robot that infiltrates your brain and like forces you to follow this principle. I mean, again, it's up to the decision of everybody. Like this is the whole point of having a voluntary society, which is I'm for. Like I'm for having just a completely voluntary society. But having this voluntary society requires people to actually participate intellectually, engage with ideas, understand what a voluntary society means. So this means like politically, so on and so forth. And I'm not talking about like everybody. I'm talking about like the people who are like making the society. So like it's gonna be a roughly a small group of people, but like they have to engage and understand what they're getting into. And so those who want to participate in the society have to rationally evaluate it. There was debates during the American founding. Like people debated about everything possible. Like what's the proper procedures and blah, 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 and whatever, and who cares. But what I'm saying is that like once, especially a society that's based on principle, based on individual rights, I would say when they go forth and say, hey, this is the law of land, we're protecting individual rights, we're allowing everybody to live how they want to, and so on and so forth. It's up to you as an individual, as a participant in that society, to decide whether or not these principles is good. And so if you make a decision that they're not and you're like, I don't care about them, right? That's up to your discretion. You're still going to jail, but.
So then you're saying that it's fine to do that. That it's your choice ultimately.
Yeah, it's literally at all times. It's literally a choice for me to participate in the society or not. I can go steal and whatever, but I noticed that like for my own well-being and my own happiness, right? I know that me doing all these bad things is contrary to my own well-being, like my flourishing, my life, like everything. So like there is a reason why I wouldn't do it.
Right. So how would you justify? Let me rephrase that. Would you try to tell the terminally ill person not to go do that?
I mean, yeah, because I mean it would be a long shot. But the long shot would essentially being, okay, I would understand why he's doing X, Y, and Z, and maybe he'd be probably like. Maybe he'll try to engage. If they try to not engage with me, I'm not gonna waste my time. But that's just me. But if they're trying to engage me, they'll say, okay, maybe I want to, and then that leads to down question. Okay, well, like, why do you want to, and so on and so forth. Wait, actually, but this will be a little bit weird because you're saying mentally ill. So I see what you mean now. But that just goes into a whole different conversation and trying to show him in principle why this would be doing wrong, even though he wants to.
Yeah. So you would have to admit that it's not really worth that person's effort to try to be objectively moral. They should just do what they want because it's going to bring them greater pleasure in that moment.
Oh no, I don't know. One shouldn't be worried about pleasure.
Or I'm sorry, not pleasure, but I guess I would say that the basis for objective morality is ultimate satisfaction. I agree with you in the fact that it's good for the person. Not just for someone else, it's also good for the person, which means good, meaning satisfying to the person. So if you're going to use that as a basis to follow morality because it's satisfying to I'm going to say the actor, then you would have to admit that the person that wants to kill something further, that their satisfaction in that moment is just as valid and just as right as your inclination to follow your morality because it's good for your satisfaction.
Yeah, no. Again, it wouldn't be just satisfaction. That could be utilized so loosely. As a person who used to kind of indulge in moral arguments like 2 years ago, as I don't really do now anyways, I just talk about political and philosophic stuff. How do I put this? It wouldn't be satisfaction. Again, it would be the basis of the morality would be outlined by, again, the factual requirements for one's pursuit of happiness. right? And by happiness, I don't mean just kind of this random state of experience that you're having, such as similar to joy or satisfaction, and none of that. By happiness, I mean a non-contradictory state of joy, which is essentially that state you actually come to when you actually look back on the sum of all your actions, and you're essentially in agreement. You're in a consensus with yourself. I don't know what are used to whatever words to use to explain the situation, but you're in agreement with all the activities that you did that led up to where you are now. It's a very high level of satisfaction, a very unique one. This is why happiness is kind of a word utilized throughout time. It's a very unique status of mind. There is objective requirements to get that, right? I would argue that, one who does not pursue objective cognitive value, right? A very basic one being achievement, right? The mind very much so works on achievement. And so if you achieve something, then the mind is going to work harder to achieve something, and so achieve more and greater and stuff like that. This is an objective requirement for you to reach happiness, right? Setting a goal and achieving it. Which is also a mental value. This is why dopamines exist and so on and so forth. Then there's also the physical aspect of like, you're walking on a desert and there's a bush with thorns in it. I would say it's objectively moral for you to walk around this bush because you given the knowledge that the thorns are prickly, they can cut you and they can possibly infect you. This is all objectively physically bad for your body. And so it would be objectively moral for you to walk around it. And so those are like the two aspects I would argue with. I forgot where I was leading to, so
I get that. So if you want to do the desert and the thorn situation, if you chose to walk in those thorns and chose to ignore your it's objectively right for you to walk around the thorns, but if you choose to ignore that, there's nothing wrong with that.
What's wrong with that is that you're undermining your own life in some capacity. That would be the issue.
Yes, but why? Yeah, but why is that an issue? Why can't you just choose to do that?
Okay. I see. You're trying to get to the meta question. You're not asking what's wrong within the moral framework of what's walking into the bush. You're essentially saying what's wrong with walking into the bush if you don't already accept the moral code. That's what you're asking.
Yes, or if you accept the moral code and choose to ignore it.
Oh, if you accept the moral code and choose to ignore it, then the answer of what's wrong with that is kind of self-evident, right? The whole purpose of the morality that I'm setting forth is what's best for you as a human being. And so then walking into the thorn bush, that would be the opposite of what's best for a human being. There would be inherent contradiction. It would violate the moral code inevitably. And so that's what would be the issue with it in principle.
Yes.
And then also the physical aspect, like it is like you can get diseases, you can get your leg amputated. Like I think it would just be kind of basic shit like that. But if somebody who doesn't accept the moral code and doesn't understand that the moral code that I'm laying out is for flourishing and survival or surviving and thriving and so on and so forth, then if he doesn't understand that and doesn't accept it, then there is no such thing as good or bad. It's just actions that he takes. And so by good or bad, I mean in his consciousness. There is no moral code that he can follow to determine what is good and what is not bad because he doesn't have one. So good and bad to him is irrelevant. Now, as society, who is based on a moral code that is for survival and thriving, and this person's just making whimsical actions and just not following any moral code and wants to steal or violate people, that's fine. We still have the right, morally, to throw this guy in jail.
Yeah, when you're talking about society, I guess all I'm trying to get to is we both agree on the basis of morality being what's best for the self. I guess all I'm saying is if you choose not to follow that, or in the case of the terminally ill patient, like say they're going to die in a day, the pleasure that they're going to get from killing something is going to outweigh the pleasure that they're going to get from not doing it because it's moral. And so that's just as valid as being moral.
I don't know. Me personally, because my moral philosophy is actually so concretized, and it's so strong. Like when people if I'm with I mean, it's quite often I'm in college, so. But if oftentimes I'm with a group of people and they're sitting there thinking, it's like, yo, bro, should we steal that? should we really steal that? And they sit there and think about it and they ponder it and they sit there and say, no, I'm not going to steal it. And if you really pick their brain, they're going to say, the reason why I didn't steal it is because I didn't want to get caught, right? But the answer is never, nah, the principle of stealing is wrong, period. Like, they never say the reason why stealing is wrong is because you're depending on other people. And I'm actually admitting to myself that I can't get it myself, right? I don't have the capacity to produce what I stole myself or something like that, right? They never say something like that. So what I'm getting at is, me personally, as a person who has that moral philosophy so explicit in my mind, if I had a day to live and they give me a gun and was like, yo, go buck wild, go crazy. Like, even in that day, that little hour is going to take, I would feel horrible. Like, I wouldn't feel good. I would die a sad man. And so that's why, I think in the mentally ill person, I think the only reason why they wouldn't, or they, would choose to do that is because they don't care about that moral philosophy, or they don't care about, or they never really cared in the first place to have that moral kind of internal urge and that bad feeling that happens afterward after violating, animals or whatever. I don't know. It's weird. We're in the midst of psychology right now. And it's This is not my spot.
No, yeah, I agree with you. And I'm saying in that situation, there would be no reason for them to be moral. There would be no convincing that person to be moral.
It just depends how much they're going to commit themselves to reject morality. It just depends, because there is a point when if you start rejecting morality, you're not just rejecting morality, you're rejecting reason. And so when you say there is no reason for that person to follow, there would be a reason, but the problem is that they're rejecting reason. It would be.
It's not rejecting reason. They might be like, yeah, that's totally reasonable, but me personally, I just want to, reasonably, it's going to bring me more pleasure right now to kill this thing, and I'm going to die tomorrow, and it's not going to matter. So what?
Yeah, you just kind of prove that they're rejecting reason, because you said, hey, that's a pretty good reason, but me personally, which literally implies that they're excluding themselves within reason, which means
because the reason would be, like you said, it would bring you guilt, but they don't feel guilt.
I wouldn't say that would be the main thing. Again, it's kind of hard because we're talking about a person in the hospital patient. In the hospital right now.
No, I think they call it sadists.
Oh, sadist. Oh, I thought you meant mentally ill person. I'm sitting here picturing a guy in a hospital bed this whole time. I don't know. Okay, you mean actual sadist. Okay, cool. Again, I don't, this is something I never really cared to look for, which is the actual explicit philosophy, or the actual explicit principle to say when people are like, oh, how do you justify that murder is objectively wrong? I don't have an explicit direct thing to say, because I never really looked for it.
Yeah, I guess that's all. That's just the point that I'm trying to make, is you can't explain it.
I would say
without God.
I would say definitely explainable. There's people. I know a person or two that definitely has that answer. We have a very, very similar philosophy, and I know people who have answered it. I probably listened to them. I don't remember. Who have my philosophy, but are actually much more knowledgeable in it. But the answer is there. I just don't know where it is. But what I'm getting at is, by that I mean, I know how to justify the existence of an objective morality, that this morality must necessarily exist. Now, applying that morality to certain contexts and certain examples and certain scenarios, that's where the really hard work stuff is. And so I don't really like to have fun and I don't want to answer every concrete example. And so I never train myself to think that way anyways.
Yeah, I would just say, if something's not true in every single situation, then it's not objectively true. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that there's objective morals, but you can't objectively give a reason for everyone to follow those morals, because without God.
Oh, no. Okay. So no. Okay. So I think, again, this goes back to a different understanding of objectivity. By objectivity, I mean fact oriented, essentially, or reality derived. That's what objective means. And something can be fact derived and yet subject to change, but that doesn't mean that its objectivity it's dissolved. So an example, right? It would be, I would say, what's a good example? What's a really good example right now? Like something very basic. Okay, cool. Let me try. Let me see. Okay, cool. This phone is on, 44% right now. In a couple of hours is going to die soon. So I would say like objectively, it would be like a moral thing for me to do to charge it tonight because, I have grandparents on here and I don't want to miss their call or like whatever. Like that would be a good thing that would like benefit my life is like keeping in contact with my grandparents and stuff like that. If they called, I need this phone charge. So that would be like a moral decision. But like, so charging my phone is a moral decision, but like, somebody whose phone is on 98% or something like that doesn't have to make the exact same moral choice that they have to charge that phone tonight because maybe that's a phone they don't use and it's going to stay on like 98 the whole entire day. And so, that doesn't mean, how do I put this? That doesn't mean like the principle itself of charging your phone is like subjective now.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow. If you're talking about like charging your phone is moral because you don't want to miss the call from your grandparents because that would both make you feel bad and them feel bad.
I mean, if you're talking, look, I'm not getting into the reasoning why or it is not moral. That's not what I was talking about. I'm giving that example to show that a certain principle can change in depending context, and yet it doesn't make it not objective no more. It will still be objective because it will still be fact oriented.
Yes, I guess what I'm saying is you can't objectively say that it is more. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to frame this. Would you agree saying that with telling someone they should be a moral person?
Yeah.
Why? And I think I know what you're going to say because I think we've already said this is because it's best for their psychological well-being.
I mean, the reason why I'd be telling someone else to be more of a moral person. Well, I mean, the reason why I would tell anyone to be more of a moral person is one, if I care about them. So me telling them to be more moral would enhance our relationship amongst each other. So one, I would have to care about the person. Two, as a byproduct, it would enhance their lives essentially.
Right, but what is the reason you would give that they should be moral?
It would be enhancing our relationship.
So it has nothing to do with their psychological well-being. Like outside of your relationship, like if you were never going to see this person again.
Yeah, their whole life would be better as a byproduct of what I did.
Okay.